If I said to you, what would you spend to make sure your kid was well and happy? And you would, I'm sure, say, I would spend that.
Make it rain, Pete. Make it
rain. you would compromise on all the other things like your coffees, your holidays and so forth. Yet when you're the individual who has to be looked after or looking after yourself, we don't apply that same model.
How do you take care of and look after your own health?
The main things for me, eating as healthily as I can, trying to get the exercise, which, like I said, it can be difficult. And then the one that I struggle with a little bit is getting enough sleep.
A lot of literature out there now is that people are living longer and longer, but actually 50% of those years are in poor health. And although within the last 60 years, we've gained somewhere between 16 and 19 additional years, the number of healthy years has stayed exactly the same.
Hello and welcome back to The Men's Manual, a podcast where we cover everything from low testosterone to sexual health to being a dad and everything else in between. No topic is off limits, and we're all about getting men talking about the things that impact their health that they don't necessarily naturally like to share. I'm Shaun Stafford, a manual ambassador, and I'm here to listen and help steer the conversation around these sometimes difficult subjects to tackle. The episode today is called, At What Age Should I Start Caring About My Health? Which is quite a big question to ask. The short answer is probably as soon as possible. However, I'm sure today's conversation around this will be a little bit more complicated than that. Now, any fans of this show already will know that I love a statistic. So here are some that we have pulled together for this episode. Nationally, half of all deaths for men result from cancer and cardiovascular disease. There is a 4-year life expectancy gap between men 79 and women 83 in the UK. And for the first time since the 1980s, between 2018 and 2020, there was a decline in male life expectancy. There is also a direct relationship between health and socioeconomic status. Men in the most deprived areas in England live nearly 10 years fewer than those in the least deprived, with the gap in healthy life expectancy for these groups being nearly 20 years. Prostate cancer is the most common cancer in men in the UK and accounted for 27% of cancer cases in men between 2016 and 2018, and 14% of all deaths caused by cancer between 2017 and 2020. So clearly there's work to be done to improve health outcomes for men, so let's get into that now. I'm joined by TV presenter and dad of 3, yes 3, Nigel Clarke, who's a regular face on CBeebies, and he also has his own podcast, Dadvengers, which aims to unite dads in their shared experiences. Hi Nigel, welcome to The Men's Manual. Thank you for being here, and thank you so much for coming in today to share your experiences. Why did you want to be on our podcast today?
Thanks for having me, first off. I mean, men talking is really, really important. And generationally, I don't think we've done it as much before. So it's important to show that we need to do it now and to get into the conversations that need to be had so that the outlook for men is better. So that's really why I'm here.
Thanks for giving up your time and coming to join for what I think will be a really, really interesting conversation. I'm also joined by Dr. Earim Chaudry, Chief Medical Director here at Manual. He'll be here to offer some medical insights into men's health as they age and what can affect them throughout the stages of their lives. Thanks for being here, Earim. We appreciate you taking some time out of your very busy day at Manual to help us navigate the topics and lend your expert insights. Why do you think this podcast is important?
Thanks for having me, firstly. It's incredible to be here and lovely to meet you both. I think broadly we know that there's a huge delta between the kind of prevalence and severity of problems that men experience and actually them adopting the solutions that really lead to healthy outcomes and happiness and longevity for them. And I think there's just so much to do societally to be able to improve that and move the needle. And so anything that we can do, I think, is going to be important and useful.
Amazing. Well, I think between us, we're going to have a lot of insights into men's health and men's health issues and how we have a tendency to bury our heads in the sand. And sometimes that can have dire consequences. So Nigel, first off, how do you take care of and look after your own health?
In today's modern society, when we're doing this, that, and the other. And we've got to take the kids to school. And it's difficult. I'm not going to lie. It's difficult. The main things for me, eating as healthily as I can, trying to get the exercise, which, like I said, it can be difficult to find the time to go to the gym or do these things, but we need to kind of make time for them. And then I think the one that I struggle with a little bit is getting enough sleep, because I will work whenever I can. So if I suddenly need to work at like 10, 11 o'clock at night, once all the kids have gone to bed, and I'm like, whoa, the house is quiet and I can get some work done, and I'm sitting there till 1 o'clock in the morning working, then that happens. And getting up again at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, wow, well, how much sleep did I actually get? So I could probably do a little bit better with my sleep, but I also try and manage the diet and getting a bit of regular exercise as well.
Well, those 3 pillars are kind of the fundamental pillars for well-being, in my opinion. I think if you can move in an effective way as regularly as you can, eat nutrient dense and a balanced diet, and then, which most people and most men always kind of push down the list, if you can get enough sleep, I think you're onto a winning combination. How about yourself, Earim?
What Nigel said really resonates with me, because I'm up like a night owl in the evenings. It's quiet. I've got 2 kids myself as well. And it just feels that real opportunity to really focus on just doing some me time, getting through some admin and some chores and so forth. I'm probably one of those individuals who probably don't want to practice what I do, and probably just follow what I preach.
Say, not just I do.
So, I'm up very late, and I'll end up being, I think it's been a chronic thing. I've always considered it a bit of a superpower to be able to be up during the night, almost a strategic advantage in getting more work done. But when you really drill down on the science, it's really a route to very poor health outcomes. And sleep is such a misunderstood thing. So I think really resonates with me what Nigel's saying. I think Nigel's probably doing a better job than me in terms of sort of nutrition and sort of the exercise thing. I think for myself, it's always been around my interests have been more kind of cognitive and sort of academic and sort of using my brain, and the movement side has really suffered. But I'm 42 now, and I'm really finding now's the time where I'm still starting to really need to pivot into doing a bit more for myself and actually carving out time. Unless you do that, it doesn't just happen organically.
This is the thing.
And I think you'll find that sometimes it may sort of come across as being selfish, but actually spending a bit of time and investing in your own well-being and your own sort of care makes you turn up better for other people that you're responsible for, whether it's your wife, whether it's your kids. If you're in a better place and you're healthier and fitter and more rested and on top of your stuff, chances are you'll be able to give them exactly 100%. What they need in a much more effective way.
100%. Yeah, if we're cranky, groggy, we're not giving the best of ourselves. So you're totally right. We've got to take a little bit of time to just make sure we're in the right place, because everyone else benefits from it.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to pour from an empty cup broadly, and
like
sort of
that.
Almost leading into a little bit of nerdiness and science. But I'm bring up the kind of Newton's first law in terms of inertia, and things will just carry on as they are. So if you're in a pathway to a poor health outcome, unless you do something and move from that straight line, that velocity will just carry on. And as your body ages and as you start to get more stresses, like it's not a machine that will just continue to just function and just be able to serve you. And if you can't serve yourself, you can't support others. And parenthood is so tough.
Oh, yeah.
It's so hard.
My next question was going to be, so there was your lives BC, before children. And how has that changed your health, your priorities toward health, and also just actioning things that have an impact on your health post children? So now that you're dads,
it's a really good question, right? It's a really good question. And I think there are 2 sides to it, because yes, you've had kids and your sleep gets hit hard straight away,
very hard
off the bat. Your sleep gets hit hard off the bat. But, and I talk to people about this, your exercise and movement actually gets better.
Because you're running around chasing
Because
kids.
you're running around chasing after kids. You're pushing prams all around the place. You're having to do things. You're kind of a bit more active. So especially in those first few years, I'd say your activity and thinking about, I need to get out and do stuff. I think you need to think about that less, because you just automatically do it.
And I think we can perceive movement and exercise as structured. Go to the gym, and actually trying to get as much movement just from your basal level of activity, running around after the kids. And I agree with you. I absolutely felt that sort of running around. I think that's when I started actually thinking about my health, because I was wheezing just going around the swings. And, you know, my 3-year-old was catching me up, and then you start to really worry about your kind of health.
And then once they get to 2 or 3 and they're like, oh, pick me up, you're like, whoa, I'm starting to develop muscles here that I forgot I had. So yeah, definitely. I think the movement side, you have to think about less when you become a dad. Nutrition, wow, that I'm just trying to go through it in my head. I think that you maybe think about a little bit less, because you're thinking about, when am I going to feed this child? And your own thought about I'm going to get my 3 squares a day goes a little bit awry. I think maybe the timings of your meals can go off, because this one's eating then, and the sleepless nights and all of that. I think the food and nutrition side of it can get neglected a bit. So it's about being conscious of those things.
But also the relationship with sleep and nutrition is so bi-directional. From a, you'll know from a hormonal point of view with leptin and ghrelin, and how when you're tired, the hormones that are released make you feel less satiated when you are already full. And the flip side happens when you're well rested. You actually, can be fulfilled with less food. So staying on top of your diet and sleep are so intrinsically related and so sort of bi-directional that it's one of those ones where putting sleep at the top of the value chain for what you should be focusing on almost has a knock-on effect to the other two.
Yeah.
So going back to a little bit more of sort of your health and your wellness routine, like how has your sort of fitness and health journey changed from when you were younger to now?
For me, I've always been that fit and healthy person, because part of my work was surrounded with that. So having trained in dance, one of the first jobs I did straight out of Performing Arts College was a show called Stomp.
Oh, yeah.
So I performed in that show for about 4 years full time, and then for another 16 years or so part time. So that in itself kept me fit. I didn't have to think about going to the gym. I didn't have to think about keeping fit. Work kept me fit. If you're doing, 6 shows a week of that, you don't need to do anything else, because each one of those shows is, maybe a 10 or 15k run. You're talking an hour and 40 minutes of just full on activity. So I didn't have to think about it. Now that I'm not doing that, I have to think about it. I have to actually think, right, what am I going to do to keep myself fit? What am I going to do to keep myself active? So there's a whole thing that I'm having to learn that I didn't have to do before, because I was just always in it. And even before I worked with Stomp and was like dancing, even at school, I was in the basketball team, I was in the athletics team. I was always doing things that kept me active, because I enjoyed them. I wasn't doing them because, I thought I need to keep fit. I was doing them because this is fun and I like doing it. So for me, there's been a total shift now in, I'm not doing it for, I try and do it for fun, as in the things I choose to do as activities are fun, but I'm doing it because I know that I need to.
Yeah. What would you say would be fun activities? Do you find, because a lot of people find going to the gym not as fun as, say, playing five-a-side football or playing tennis or playing a sport, interacting with other people. The gym can be quite a sort of singular sort of pursuit.
Yeah.
Do you love going to the gym, or are you more of a sports guy?
I'm more of a sports guy, dance as well.
Right.
There's other things that you can do that are going to keep you fit. And even just getting out and going for a bike ride, like go for a mountain biking weekend with your friends or something like that. There are other ways that are, I would say, more community-based or more friend-based. And I think some of those, when you're interacting with other people and doing it, not only does it make the activity a little bit more fun, but you've got a bit of accountability as well. It's like, okay, we're arranging to do this thing next week. You can't suddenly drop out and go, I'm not coming anymore. Whereas a gym morning at 6 a.m., when you wake up out of bed and you look at that watch and you go, am I going to stay in bed? Yeah, stay in bed. This is so much easier to do.
Yeah. How about you, Earim?
I feel like a bit of a fraud after that.
Well, I didn't dance for 16 years.
So no dancing, not much movement in my younger days. I just felt that, I just took it for granted. Like my body was there, it was going to function, it was going to work. Maybe in the last couple of years, it started creaking, and I'm much more aware of needing to do something. I think for me, going to the gym has always been just a chore. I've never enjoyed going by myself.
Yeah.
I actually did start going with the founder of Manual actually when we first started the company, and that lasted for about 2 months, and I fractured my foot, and then for the rest of the 6 years never went. Was all kind of very much on the conveyor belt of work.
Yeah.
And I think it maybe in the last year or so, after some of the COVID challenges, I had a bit of challenge with my breathing and so forth. I've now, and with my kids, I've really focused down on actually what additional things can I do that also almost just happen naturally in terms of walks, going with the kids for a cycle. I've befriended my neighbor, and he kind of comes around, and we kind of 2-3 times a week. I've got a gym in my garage, so he comes and keeps me honest.
There you go. See, this is the accountability that I'm talking about.
So yeah, that's kind of pushed me. I think that kind of accountability. What I really would love to be able to get into some, five-a-side and be able to do it. Just things I enjoy, and just will make me. I mean, there's a cycle club near me. I met a doctor, and he was telling me that we cycle as a group, and they've called it the Bombay Bicycle Club. And so I've been invited to that group. I'm kind of a silent member on it at the moment, but I feel like I need to get a bike and just get out there and kind of join them. I think that will keep me accountable. And that's where all the science is as well, around doing things in groups that are habits that you can carry on doing. And men are often quite solitary beasts as well.
The thing is that when you're doing things with other people as well, there's that competitive nature, and if you're a competitive person, that kicks into it as well. I've heard of people having groups, and then there's league tables in the groups because did you actually spend the time doing any work at the gym? Like, I've got 40 minutes in, that gets me 2 points on my league table, and it that competitiveness is brought in, and I think men like that.
I think they do. So with your sort of role and the podcast that you have, why do you think dads are a really interesting group to engage with?
The key to that for me is that I don't think men have talked about their feelings, their experiences, especially when it comes to parenting and that whole ecosystem. I don't think they've talked about it. And on top of that, that space is totally changed from what it was 50 years ago. So our dads, they were all going to work early in the morning, coming back. We talk about seeing our dads. I saw him in the evenings just before I went to bed, and I saw him at weekends.
Bath time, maybe.
Yeah, that kind of thing. That's totally changing. Men are wanting to be at home to throw in and kick in and be part of it all. So it's something that they haven't seen as much before, so they need a bit of guidance. They need to know, are you doing this as well? To hear the experiences and know that, okay, this is a new landscape, this is a new place, and you're doing it, you're having the same struggles as I am. Just that shared knowledge and that shared experience makes men feel like, okay, I'm in the right place, I'm doing it, rather than feel like I'm on my own, help.
I think you probably hit the nail on the head in the role and kind of the aspirations and the structure of being a dad. Even, go one generation up to our parents, and a lot of guys, they learn from what they see and what they've experienced from their dads. And I think what being a dad is today is even unrecognizable almost from what being a dad was even for our parents. So I think having a resource and a community where we're all going through the same sort of ecosystem and questions and problems.
You hear conversations of our parents and their friends. Like, did you go to the birth? Oh no, I'm not going. I didn't go to the birth. What are you talking about? That's not my space to be at the... Whereas now, like 90% of the dads are like, yeah, I'm going to the birth. Of course I'm going to the birth. What do you mean? Of course. Whereas before, that wasn't the thing.
I think it's because my wife wouldn't not let me be.
Well,
she was like,
"You won't be here."
So you're going to go watch the football, are you? When I'm pushing this out, really? That's you're going with that, are you? No, I'm not, dear. I'll be there.
But also, I think men haven't been used to any form of kind of structured introduction to kind of the baby is coming.
Yeah.
This is how you're going to push. This is how the baby's going to come, and all of that. And then when you start going into school and more structured education, they have a network of mums. So whenever I go to do a school pick, I kind of feel orphaned because I don't know where I'm going, what I'm supposed to be doing. And the other mums are all chatting, and I kind of feel I go there, I pick the kid up, there's less dads. So you really have to push a bit more to create that connection, or even if there are the dads,
to create that
quite
community,
in terms
to create
of
that community,
pick the kid up and come back. But I agree that just that kind of forum for having this conversation of how society is changing. And actually, men want to be much more involved generally with their children. They want to be present, and there's so much. It's so great for the soul in terms of kids and what they bring to your lives, and to not have that is just such a kind of sadness in a way.
The way you talk about it reinforces that I'm doing the right thing, because the whole point of Dadvengers, which I set up, was not just the podcast, was literally to create those communities and connections and that support for dads, so that exactly what you just described is negated. It's like, okay, we've got groups. I'm going out with the boys. We were all taking the kids down to the park this Saturday. Yeah. We've got a Dadvengers meet or whatever it is, so that they have that. Because I think when you do have that, that's when mums feel more supported, dads feel more like they're not a third wheel, like spare wheel. Yeah. And that whole sort of locking in of the family unit is what we need.
And we know societally men don't like to talk. There's just so much statistics. Around
right,
it.
Okay. This is it.
I'm gonna feel enabled to do.
I'm gonna go against that, but only in a specific way.
Yeah.
It's not that men don't like to talk. Men need the right impetus to talk.
Yeah.
That's for me what it is. Because I'm going to give you another sort of example of it. People say men don't talk about their emotions much and that they don't show their emotions. On a Saturday afternoon, when Arsenal are about to win I don't support football.
Okay. Thought we just became best friends.
No, but if I did support a football team, I live in North London. I'm from the era of Ian Wright, Bergkamp and all of that. Okay. I would be an Arsenal supporter.
Good lad.
But back to it. On a Saturday afternoon, a football match is happening and two teams are playing. The amount of emotions you will see in a local pub, at home, at the football match is incredible. You'll see happiness, sadness, like confusion, all the emotions that you could ever want a human being to experience, they're happening around that football match. And they will show them graphically sometimes. Yeah. They will show those emotions. So it's not that we don't show our emotions or we're scared of showing them. It's just like we think that there are only certain situations that we can show our emotions in. But hopefully, with things like this podcast and more conversations, that will change and men will hopefully feel more comfortable.
I think there's also a lot of research around the guardrails on certain topics where they feel that they can be open about it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you look at some of the literature out there, I think there was a YouGov study in 2019. And if you ask men how many close friends do they have, they'd say 1 in 3. They have that, but one person would have three close friends. And when they narrow that to things that you would be able to talk to someone about personally, so your personal experiences, your struggles, your mental health, well, they say, well, actually, it's 2 friends that I have.
Yeah.
And so it narrows. And again, when I'm sort of building on that, so when boys and girls, when they're young, very vocal, very comfortable talking. And there seems to be some switch that changes in our biology and our kind of societal experiences that means that actually men alter in their communicative ability and the forums in which they feel comfortable. I think we probably have all grown up those eras where you'd start to talk about something and someone would say, stop being gay, don't be a pussy. And then you naturally,
man up, all of those things.
Theory, you just shut down.
That is exactly what it is. Yeah. And what society doesn't realize is they're everywhere. Yeah. They're everywhere. And we do them to our kids from about like 2. You know, you've seen those studies where like parents have a boy and a girl, and the boy tries to do something and the girl tries to do the same thing. The boy can't do it and the girl can't do it. When the boy can't do it, they're like, you can do it, go on, carry on, get on with it. When the girl can't do it, they're like, oh, don't worry about it, though. You can try next time. And from there, that's when it changes, which is it happens really, really early. And our previous generations, they didn't realize what they were doing to us. They didn't realize they were kind of pigeonholing us and pushing us towards certain areas. And that's what we've got to change.
Do you think it comes down to being aware of judgment, right? That there'll be a time in your development when you'll feel a certain way and you'll go to express it. And then there will be that external judgment that makes you feel shut down. Do you think that has something to do with why men are maybe less likely to be vulnerable and be open and express their emotions?
I think it's so multifactorial. and ebbs and flows on how you feel about yourself and your kind of experience with the connection and community that you have and which life stage you're at and so forth. But clearly there is that feeling of that you are going to be judged by what you say, and the idea that you expect to be stoic and man up and be strong and resilient, I think is very much ingrained in men, and all the literature would demonstrate that that's the case. I mean, we've seen one of the leading causes of death in men, young men, so under the age of 49, is suicide.
Yeah.
Now, again, multiple factors for that. But if you get to the stage where you feel actually you're better off dead than in the world, and you've been experiencing those kind of challenges, and you've not been able to find that there's anyone that's going to care to listen to you, that just shows you how grave the problem is. And then in terms of the kind of permission to talk, I think on a one-to-one level, actually men do talk. I've had lots of intimate conversations, but in a group, I haven't had that experience that men feel as comfortable unless it's trust that's built in a group over time. And even if I take my own friendship group from when you were younger to kind of now we're in our kind of 40s, the conversation has materially changed. And I think we're significantly more sensible and able to have those conversations. But, back in my uni days, I can't really think I would be having those and feeling comfortable.
I think you're making a great point, and you're making me think of the male groups that you have when you are growing up, when you're at school, because those groups, I don't know about you, they're totally based on judgment and banter. Let's bat that word around that. But that banter, it's meant to be friendly, but it's based on like derogatory stuff. It's based on, oh, you're being a little bit, come on now. Yeah. It's based on that. And that is the place we fall into. That's the place where we go, okay, or I can't really say that because he's going to take the mick and blah, blah, blah. And doing that year in, year out, you kind of just assume that all your male spaces are going to be a little bit like that, which is why it's so important for men to have safe spaces where they can say something and they know that somebody's going to turn around and go, hey, are you all right then? Do you want to talk about it? Rather than the bants.
So I'm just speaking from personal experiences and very friendship groups throughout different stages of my life, very banter driven, very superficial, very, wooey, lads. But I also know that within those friendship groups that if ever there was something that was wrong, that those guys would also be the first ones there to lend an ear and say, maybe not in the group setting, but are you all right? If they could pick up on it, they would say, are you all right? And, do you want to go for a coffee, or do you want to go for a beer, or do you want to, they would be the ones to break off. So maybe, do you think it's the group setting that potentially is the barrier to that openness and that vulnerability in conversation?
To ask you a question to help with that question you just asked me, would you put into one of those groups if you were struggling with something? Have you ever put into one of those groups? Or would you go to the person on their own?
Probably the person on their own. Yeah.
So, people aren't putting into those groups because again, they don't feel totally safe. They're not totally safe spaces. And it's not because they're not saying, oh, my mates aren't nice. They're just saying my mates in that situation, in that setting, will respond with the jovial stuff. And that's not what I need right now. I need my mate on his own to hear this.
Yeah. And if we're looking in a little bit more depth and we're bringing it back to health outcomes, how do you think that embodiment of men not talking or not being openly sort of communicating things that they're struggling with, how do you think that impacts us from a health and wellness point of view?
Yeah. So if we look at maybe the real world evidence of people out there live in different countries and how they operate. So we're probably familiar with the blue zones, the areas with the biggest number of centurions and longevity. So there's 5 areas in the world. And a core component in those societies is community and a sense of purpose and actually looking after each other. So in Okinawa, which is one of the areas, they have this concept of ikigai. And so, that's around having a sense of purpose. And actually, they are cultivated on this culture of this kind of groups that support each other. And we know that actually individuals who are perhaps lonely or don't have that, they have longevity outcomes which are akin to smoking 15 cigarettes a day if you're lonely.
Wow.
And so there's this component of social support, not being lonely, having individuals around you that lead to longevity and greater health outcomes. Do we understand it fully? No. But we know that if you don't have that, that you end up with these other conditions. And it's in different areas of the body that you see that manifested. And I think we tend to drill down on mental health, but actually you see that in immunity and cardiovascular and other conditions like metabolic syndrome and obesity. And so there's this whole impact on the body.
Add to that what you were talking about before about men being 3 more times likely to take their own lives. I think a lot of those suicides wouldn't happen if we were talking more. I think if we were able to talk to people and release that pressure, because I think it's like a pressure cooker. If you release the pressure, you take that valve off a bit, the weight comes off, you're not going to get to to the crisis point. And of course, these are broad strokes. There are other situations where you're not going to avoid it because there are other things at hand. But I think with more conversations and more places for men to release that pressure, these numbers drop massively.
100%. I mean, if you lean into some of the literature around journaling and how that supports you, because we know the kind of body, the way it's wired is this autonomic systems, this hormonal system that drives on parasympathetic or sympathetic system. So the sympathetic system is the fight or flight response. So if you're constantly feeling stressed, anxious, not able to lift that lid on the pressure cooker, you drive up that sympathetic system and that elevates up your cortisol levels. Your cortisol levels are this kind of hormone that can just, as it goes up, it actually starts to kind of potentially steal from other hormones that support your body, like your testosterone.
Yeah.
And so there are just so many interactions on the biochemical level, and then on the kind of the brain itself is your kind of governor of happiness. And unless that's healthy, even though you may have years of your life, but you're actually not actually happy, well, you really question what's the point of kind of living unless you can make it satisfying.
So obviously you Nigel, do a load of work with kids and through CBeebies and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. What impact are you trying to have on the kids in terms of when the content you're creating and the message you're trying to put out there? You're trying to nip it in the bud early, right? And get people really expressing themselves.
We're trying to get people to have the tools. I think part of the problem, and we're talking about it right now, is that men haven't got the tools and the spaces. We're trying to educate children now what the tools are and to notice things so that they can talk about them. So to give an example, if a child's feeling anxious, and I'm talking about a young child, like 2-3 years old, to introduce that, even if it's down to the basics of like using emojis to say, this is angry, this is sad, this is anxious, this is whatever, to educate them on what the feelings are first, really at a young age, so that they can say, I feel this, which then means that parents can hopefully have conversations with them about them and make them feel more comfortable about these things and say, no, that's totally natural, it's totally normal, it'll pass. When you've got that education around them, around the feelings, we're going to be in a better place. If you don't know what these feelings are and you're having to learn about them in therapy in your 20s, right, you're already at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've been dealing with them from a young age, you're already going to be comfortable talking about them, identifying them, knowing yourself, if it's going to pass easily, if it's not going to pass easily, what helps for you for it to pass, whether like, oh, exercise really actually does help me loads. Yeah. I get down sometimes when I'm not exercising as much. So I think if we're scanning all these things from an early age, we start to learn about them. I equate it to like being a dancer, because that's what I know. Dancers know their bodies like other people don't know their bodies. But that's because from the age of whenever they were dancing, they were learning about their bodies. They were learning about stretching. They were learning about making a muscle stronger. They were learning about all different aspects of their body. And if you put that on any part of your life, if you learn about the emotions, you learn about this, you're going to be a better placed to kind of help all of those things.
So you said earlier that your eldest son is doing his GCSEs.
Yeah.
So with your kids, is this kind of what opened the door and being a dad and going through, the process of almost learning on the job? Is this kind of what got you started in discovering the need for this type of intervention?
No, do you know what? It was more that, okay, the world has changed a lot. When we were kids, people weren't talking about kids' mental health. They were not talking about it. It was all about, oh, he'll be all right. There was a lot of things we weren't talking about. We weren't talking about ADHD as much. There's so many things we weren't talking about. We're kind of labeling things and sort of getting a structure to everything. So with that in mind, this is still quite a new space. So I think that people needed to be educated about that new space. And that's why the content that I make, the content I get involved with is all about that, because I feel that it needs to happen. And I think we need to give parents as well as the children. I've just been working on something called Embers the Dragon with the NHS and some clinicians. And it's a program, but it's also a parenting course. And they work together, and it's all about mental health. So the kids are watching programs learning about their emotions and feelings, but the parents are learning about, okay, your child's learning about this emotion or this feeling. You might want to ask them some questions about X, Y, and Z because it'll tie in well and it'll all work together. So that's the kind of space that I want to be in at the moment, because I think it's important moving forward just as human beings.
Do you think that would have had an impact on, say, your eldest son versus your younger son? So has the space changed? Yeah, like if you'd had those tools 15 years ago, would you have parented differently?
Yeah, I think it's changing so fast right now that yes. When I had my first, I will hands up admit to, like, people were talking to me about, oh, do you want to go to the baby group or whatever? And I was like, you know what, I'm pretty cool. And I'm a confident person and I've been a confident dad from the start. But now in hindsight, having run these groups and seen the benefits, I was totally wrong. I should have been going to groups. I should have been doing X, Y, and Z, because I see the benefits and I can see what can be achieved when you do these things.
And and I know that every child is different, but can you see a difference between, say, your eldest who's 15 doing GCSEs and your youngest?
It's not that I will see a difference yet. Maybe when Cassius, who's the youngest, when he's 10 or so, I'll probably be able, 7 to 10, I reckon I'll be able to see it, because he'll have had more conversations surrounding mental health than Rory would ever have had. Rory's had them later in his life, through school, through me being educated. So now he's there. But yeah, I think Cassius will talk differently.
Cassius is on a steeper learning curve.
Yeah. Exactly that.
And how do you think society has kind of changed in that time? Because obviously you've been doing your work and you have your role as a father to your children.
Yeah.
What I'm always conscious of is there's the factors you can control, and there's all the other factors that are moving so rapidly. Social media, the kind of what their friends are exposed to, mobile phones, etc., schooling environment.
Yeah. For me, there's one worrying part, and it's that you've got a lot of people jumping on this, trying to do what we're talking about here. But have they got the consistency and the staying power? Not everyone does. So I think we're going to get a lot of people getting into this and trying to do it, but then a lot of fall off as well. And I think there's slight danger in people having access to something and then not having access to something, and there not being something around where they're like, okay, well, I had this, but now it's gone and I feel lost now. So that for me is the only scary side about the quickness of it happening. I think what is happening needs to happen, and it's great. I just feel like there'll be a lot of people, as you get with any industry or anything that's new, everyone wants to jump on it and try it, and then they find out it's hard, and then they try and find out, oh, Don, you mean it's like releasing a podcast. What do you mean I've got to get to episode 100 before I start seeing the benefits? Yeah, you kind of have to like put in some time. so they get to episode 7 and then they're like, okay, well, and it's like, oh, well, you've just left a load of people that in the lurch that were on this journey with you, and now they've got to find something somewhere else that might not resonate with them as much. So that's the only thing for me that with the changing and how quickly it's happening.
Do you and this is probably a little bit off topic but on topic, just going back to something you mentioned earlier, like, do you let your kids use socials?
Yeah, I think you don't let them use it too early, but I think it's dangerous to not let them use it. You create a monster if you don't let them use it. If you keep your kids away from it, they're going to bump into it elsewhere, and that's when you've created the thing you didn't want, because then they're going to want to have it all the time. I think it's about having healthy conversation about social media from a very, very early age. It's like 6, 7. You should be talking about it with your kids. Not that they have access to it, not that they have an account or anything. You shouldn't have an account till you're about 13. But the conversations need to happen. Otherwise, that's where really, really scary things can happen. On our podcast, we had Ian Russell, who has been instrumental in changing the laws around social media and what the companies have to do, online safeguarding. Because he does that because he lost his daughter. She took her own life. She went to bed one night, said goodnight to him, and she wasn't there in the morning. And he took it upon himself to change.
Make sure that doesn't happen to someone else. Or do everything you can to make sure that doesn't
I think
happen.
I recall reading some of his statement. He said some of the material is still out there that she's been exposed to. So there's still
out
so
there.
much.
It's still on there.
So much to do there.
Yeah.
And I think building on your point, I say it's your duty to try and support your kid to be able to function in the world. And ultimately, you're not going to be able to remove all of that type of, potentially toxic, negative content, addictive content. They've got to find their own way. And there's only so much kind of say and control that you can have, but you can just give them the tools, and sort of when it's their time to go, you kind of say, okay.
Yeah, you want them to be able to come to you and say, Mum or Dad, I saw this. And if they don't feel comfortable to do that because you said, no, you shouldn't be on there, don't even, you're at a loss already. Whereas if you've said, this is social media, this is blah, 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 if you ever see anything, just come chat to me about it. It's fine. Let's explore it together. They're going to feel way more comfortable to turn around to you and go, Dad, have you seen this? How am I supposed to feel about this? And then you've got that open conversation, because that's what we all want. We want our kids to be talking to us. And I think building those inlines and that foundation, that we have a good rapport with our kids to be able to talk to them about things young, means when we hit adolescence, folks, I don't know if you're there yet.
No, not yet. Not yet.
It means when we
Got
get
all that fun
3 and
stuff to
6 very
come.
far away. I'm already getting sad at them growing up so fast.
It means when we get there, it can take the brunt of the blow down a little bit.
Yeah.
It was I saw something the other day that was a dad talking about it, and he said one of the things that he committed to doing when he was being an active dad was he'd never blast his kids, because he always wanted to, they could do something wrong. He'd never go in too hard on them, because he'd always want them to be able to, if they needed to, go to him and call. And he said, the proof of concept for his style of parenting was when his son drove to a party, and at 11:30 at night, he got a call from him, and he said, Dad, you're going to be really angry with me, but I've drunk too much. Yeah. He goes, I've had probably 3 or 4 beers too much, and I don't want to drive home. Can you come pick me up?
That's what we all want.
Yeah.
And he was like, this to me is like the eureka moment where my parenting style worked, because my son didn't get in his car, because he didn't get in his car drunk, drive home, potentially kill himself or other people, because he was too scared to give me a call. And I think as dads, that's kind of
where we want to be.
That's kind of where we want to be.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
So from our conversations, I'm not going to be rude and say that none of us are getting any younger, but we're all aging. But we're all aging. Is there anything that you're particularly worried about when it comes to aging?
I wouldn't say that I'm worried. I would say that I'm conscious. So, I don't know how much medical proof there is for this, but I think there will be if there isn't already. Alzheimer's runs in my family and dementia runs in my family. So, well, I've just kind of negated what I said. It's not meant to run in my family, but I've seen people in my family that have suffered with it. So my grandmother, my auntie, and now my dad. All on my dad's side of the family. And it's coming down towards me, I would say. So having seen it come down, I think I'm really, and having the thought process that I have, I think I'm in a good place to deal with it better than my ancestors have dealt with it. So it's not a worry, but it's a consciousness that I have that will hopefully put me in a better place.
And are there any preventative measures that you're taking? Is there anything that you're doing to kind of not stay one step ahead, but to sort of be more proactive in, that consciousness?
I think I will, for as long as I can, try and stay active, like not just physically active, just doing things, working. Even if I retired at 60, let's say, I'm never going to retire at 60. But even if I
don't think any of us are we really?
Even if I did,
Retirement's overrated for brain health.
I would continue to do things, because I think whether you've got dementia or not, when you slow down, when you stop, physically, mentally, the decline happens. So I think I'll try and push on for as long as I can.
And Earim, you probably have all the stats and data on this, but that to me sounds like it's not common sense, but not far removed. As soon as you slow down, things start to deteriorate.
Absolutely. I think continuing to utilize your brain, doing sort of activities, again, having a purpose and a focus for your day. I think given that at that age, you're going to have so much wisdom, so much experience, which you're already imparting through your podcast right now. You can only imagine at that age how much value you provide to society. So it's an aim to try to repurpose that. It may not be formal work. It depends how what your retirement plans are. And then all the well-being stuff you're doing in terms of kind of plant-based diets and antioxidants, keeping your blood pressure in control, preventing diabetes, movement, getting good vasculature to the brain. So, it's good to be conscious of it.
Totally, 100%.
Seems you're doing a lot of good things already. So,
yeah, but more than that, when it comes to that dementia side of things, I think I'm going to listen to people because that's the one. Having tried to convince my dad to go to get checked out, go to a memory clinic, get checked, and he's like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. And I'm looking at him going, just listen to me, dude. It's happening. You can't see it because that's part of the problem.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that, like, if my kids turn to me one day and say, Dad, you need to get your memory checked out, that I go, ding, 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 bing. Okay, I'm going. I'll see you a lot later. I'll be back in a bit.
Because you've just got to make sure you don't forget that. So you've got to write it down and sign it.
It's so cruel. That is exactly it.
I was about to say, like, you could have easily pranked him and said, Dad, this is the 5th time I've asked you today, when it wouldn't be the first. Then he'd be like, okay, if that's the 5th time you've asked me, then maybe I should go get it checked.
The chuckle in the memory clinic used to be that patients would forget to go to their appointments. So you always need that support. It's funny you're mentioning sort of dementia, because my dad's going through that at the moment.
Dude, I don't envy you in any way,
and
shape,
he's got
or
a more
form.
kind of vascular dementia, so it's kind of more sudden. So he went from being able to drive the car, being fully independent, doing shopping, finances, to just a real step change overnight. Wow. And he just couldn't grasp that his mental cognition deteriorated. He just didn't accept it. And I managed to bundle him into a memory clinic, and he sat there saying, well, no, everything's fine. And they did the tests. And then he was struggling to name a dolphin, for example. And even I hadn't sort of listed it diminished to that level. And so there's just these areas, the way the brain is wired, that you have certain areas of the brain that take certain components of function. And so there were specific ones around sort of reasoning and concentration that he was struggling with. And he, only after that did I get some buy-in, and he was like, okay, I should be considering, power of attorney, and I'll start taking my medications, and I'll start looking after my health. And then give it a week, he tries to slip the noose and then skip his GP appointment to get all of this done. So it's just like a constant battle to get him to engage with this realization that basically his health has diminished and he can't make his own decisions. And so, I think there is something around just being very much prepared for that and planning ahead.
I think you make a massive point that whether you're suffering from anything or not, I think men on the whole get to a point where they realize, actually, I'm going to deteriorate.
Yeah.
And I'm on my way to a certain place
Yep.
that we're all going to.
Yep.
And I'm on that journey. I'm on the decline. I'm on the downhill.
Yeah.
They don't think that they're going to get to that downhill. And they like push it away.
Yeah.
Especially the previous generation. Like, I've asked my dad questions and he's like, oh, no, I never thought about it. I'm like, what do you mean you never thought about that? Yeah. Like, it happens to every single person on the planet. Did you think you were going to be the one in billions and billions of people who it was never going to happen to?
But men need
that's
something more tangible. So when I communicate with patients, and if the women, you can just articulate the mechanisms and what will happen. But with men, you've got to say, you will get bowel cancer, or you will get lung cancer, and you will die. And you distill the message down into the extremes, because it tends to resonate. And a lot of the research shows that. You've got to give something for men to kind of have a very clear target.
It's almost got to be chronic slap in the face, or you won't do anything about it. And that's, I think,
even then they sometimes don't.
Yeah, we've talked about it on the podcast previously, that there is something like innate with this male machismo that we think we're infallible, we think we're indestructible, when really, as we age, we do deteriorate. For any men listening, sort of as they age, what sort of things should they be keeping an eye out for the sort of like, not necessarily red flags, but things that we're all going to go through at some point at different stages of our lives. But as we age, what can we be keeping an eye out for?
I think the key thing is being conscious that your body does age. You know, we're not like mole rats that seem to never age. Ultimately, our cells are deteriorating. We've got so many areas of our complex bodies that start to atrophy away and get wear and tear. And so you've got to be able to pick that up. So really lean into preventive medicine. Go for checks. Go to get blood tests done. Because some of these things are occult. So let's say hypertension, one of the biggest causes of cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease is one of the biggest killers for men.
Yeah.
And you won't see a symptom. You're not going to see a spot or a lump or a mass and so forth. It will generally, you know, if you do get the more extreme ends, you'll have a stroke and a heart attack.
Yeah.
So you've got to be able to go for wellness checks, get your blood pressure checked, control your blood sugar, ultimately go and have a look at the components of your body that are wearing out. And you almost work top to bottom. It's, you know, your hair starts to fall out, your eyes start deteriorating, you get cataracts, your hearing starts to deteriorate, your heart, your lungs, your gut health, your bones start to creak. And I'm certainly feeling that as I start to, even in my 40s, roll out of bed.
Yeah.
And it's just really start to do something about it. And then when you start to look at what you can do about it, there's fundamentally leaning into good lifestyle, eating well, moving, sleeping, all of those components.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head when you're saying being more conscious and also taking steps and measures to get things checked. If we're looking at somebody, say, the age of 40, how regularly should they be booking in a blood test or booking in a GP's appointment? You know, what would be the cadence that you would recommend for such measures?
Yeah, I mean, this is a struggle for me because the current systems don't necessarily have that capacity to be able to allow people to go for an annual check. But that's really what I would recommend, because that's a suitable interval in terms of making sure that your blood pressure is fine, your cholesterol's in line, that there's no unusual things happening on your skin, etc. Your mental health, you have an avenue to be able to share that with a medical practitioner. But I can't see that we have that capacity in the NHS. And so I think you've got to look at your options on how you can try to get that, or at least try to at least go for your NHS health check, and then see if you've got the means to go into other forums like proactive blood testing. So we know that as you age, your testosterone drops 1% every year after the age of 40. You're not going to be able to pick that up just by symptoms alone. So you do need some diagnostics. If you're verging into a diabetic state, it's better to elicit that earlier and have an annual HbA1c, which is a marker of diabetes. And all of those conditions broadly, the earlier you pick them up, the better your prognosis. So cancer, cardiovascular, your diabetes, because you can actually put them into almost more a remission state. So our currently societal and kind of medical approach in this country is we wait until people get diabetes almost, and we put them all on these medications, versus where actually you can reverse the disease almost if you catch it early. And there's a lot of literature out there that's kind of coming out on how having, reducing your weight and having low calorie diets and can reverse diabetes. So
I was pre-diabetic. I was pre-diabetic. I went to the doctor. They were like, this marker. I had a blood test. I was really tired all the time. And they looked at my blood and they were like, okay, yeah, you want to try and cut down on your carbs for a bit and then come back and we'll have another blood test and see where you're at. I cut down on the carbs, started eating like courgette spaghetti and stuff. And
Courgette spaghetti.
and yeah, went back 3 months later and they were like, yeah, you're all fine. Stay there. You'll be all good. Have another check in a while. And I've been fine since. But that could have easily gone unnoticed.
Could have escalated if you hadn't had that blood test. And now you're broadly going to be in a kind of category of people who have an annual check, just to make sure you stay on track. And your lifestyle interventions will broadly support you, but there'll come a point where actually you do need medication.
Yeah.
Because you just can't fight against your genetics.
What do you mean? No, I'm a man. I'll be all right.
So if you're looking at saying blood tests as a fairly low barrier entry to sort of those early diagnostics and getting ahead of kind of what's going on with your body, like how much would a at-home blood test cost, give or take?
I think it ranges from sort of 30 to 50 pounds for a blood test that you could do. That could do a panel of things.
But when you think about it, 30 to 50 pounds as opposed to a lifetime of insulin.
I mean, it's so beneficial for yourself. So, I mean, as a parent, let's say, I mean, if I said to you, what would you spend to make sure your kid was well and happy? And you would, I'm sure, say, I would spend that.
Make it rain, Pete. Make it
rain. you would compromise on all the other things like your coffees, your holidays and so forth. Yet when you're the individual who has to be looked after or looking after yourself, we don't apply that same model.
Back burner.
We just neglect ourselves and spending on your health, where broadly that's the foundation upon which everything is built. You know, we know all the quotes around you kind of you diminish your health to earn money and then you spend that money to regain your health.
Is that a question for you? Is that partly nature? As in back in the day, or if you look at animals, they will feed their children over themselves. Because it's about it's about them living on. It's not about us.
Yeah, I can understand that for maybe people who are really struggling financially, and obviously you're prioritizing and you're kind of trying to pass your seed on and your legacy.
Yeah.
But I think for many people, there are compromises they could make to be able to focus on their health. And I think it's mainly because as a society, we just take our health as a given. Yeah. And the NHS is a wonderful organization, but because it provides this healthcare for free, I think we just don't understand how much incredible upside can be created by having a really good healthcare system and healthcare input. Versus, like, I think when you go to other countries and you have to pay out of pocket, you suddenly realize actually there is some tremendous value in doing these additional tests that maybe aren't provided by that basal level of service. And so I think there's just a mindset change that's needed in an individual thinking, I'm going to invest in myself.
Yeah.
And there's other things we invest in, material things that are transient. They're not going to be there. You're going to utilize them. You're going to have hedonic adaptation. You're going to stop enjoying them. You get a nice car. You kind of get bored of it. You want another car, a bigger house, etc. But the foundational component of your life is your wellness. And it's part of the reason why I love being a doctor, because it felt like it was the most impactful thing you could do in life is to give life. Like a lot of literature out there now is that people are living longer and longer, but actually 50% of those years are in poor health. And although within the last 60 years, we've gained somewhere between 16 and 19 additional years, the number of healthy years has stayed exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. So what would you rather do? Would you rather go out? Would you rather go out in a blaze of glory on your 67th birthday at the top of your game, or would you prefer to wither away to your 90s?
Isn't that a thing that, like, survival is the most important thing? Even if we don't, that's why your man cut off his arm when he was in the
rock
cave. Yeah. It's why the football team started eating people when they're on top of the mountain. It's like survival is the utmost. It kicks in to a level. When you're actually faced with your mortality, you're like, no, I'm staying. I'm not ready. I'm staying.
But ideally, you want to achieve that with good health. And I think that's where we're missing. ultimately we're sort of living longer, but we're not getting that kind of value from those years. Because, you know, if I had a trade-off between living longer and having kind of miserable health, I probably would err on the side of actually I don't mind going a little bit earlier, provided you know my kids are sorted and my family are comfortable.
You don't get FOMO.
I'd like to take him there.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'd like to take him to that moment
Is
again.
coming to you tomorrow.
So, remember that chat we were having on the podcast? You want to go tomorrow, or do you want another 5?
Kind of, I think there's again more stats people are aware of in terms of that if they're in poor health that they would and they're really struggling, they would almost give up like other things rather than kind of have that poor health. You know, people are 5 times more likely to give up like most of their wealth to just say, well, actually, if I can have, if I almost like be where I am right now, I'm sure I'm grumbling about my back pain at the moment, but actually 10, 20 years from now, I'd say I'd love to be that age where I had just a little bit of back pain.
Yeah.
If I didn't look after my health.
So something that we love to do on every episode, we have our very own green men's manual. And what we love to do is invite our guests and invite our experts to leave a little bit of a legacy behind for the people that will follow them. So this can be related to something you've discussed and talked about today, or it can just be a nugget of information, a quote that you live by, or something that you just want to pass on to the next person to pick up this book. So we're going to start with you, Nigel.
Yeah.
For your entry, and I'm actually going to physically give you the book.
Yeah.
For your entry, what would you like that to be?
I would like my entry to be, if you become a father, make sure you take time to reach out to another father and just check in, see how they're coping with the whole situation, see if they've got other fathers that they can talk to about father stuff. Because I don't think there's enough support out there for each other, for us as men, as fathers, for each other. And I think if everyone who was a father reached out like suddenly, people would be talking more and the landscape would be different. So that would be what I would ask someone to do.
That's a great page. That's a great entry. And Earim, what would yours be? You've had a bit more time to think. So what would yours be?
So for me, life is about change, and change and growth is painful. Now, I think the individual that likes walking will walk further and a further distance than an individual who doesn't enjoy the walk. And so I would say lean into doing something that is an enjoyable pain that you can do consistently rather than going for intensity and short-term things. So find joyful things you enjoy doing that will create upside for your life.
And I think that is an amazing place to leave this podcast. So that is it for another episode of The Men's Manual. A huge thank you to Nigel Clarke for being here and chatting to us. It's great to get your insight and to hear all about your personal experiences and how they've impacted your life as both a man and a father. So thank you so much for being here. And Dr. Earim, thank you so much for sharing your expertise on health and wellness. It is greatly appreciated, and you'll be sticking around a little bit longer to help me with our next bonus episode, where we're going to be discussing what happens to the body as it ages. And last but not least, a big thank you to all of you guys listening at home. It means a lot to us, and we couldn't do this show without you. If you liked anything specific in this episode, do let us know. We love having our community engage with us, and be sure to like our content, turn on notifications, and subscribe to the podcast to give it a review or rating. This really helps the success of the show and helps other men find our community and get involved. I'm Shaun Stafford. This has been The Men's Manual, and we'll see you again next time.